think Julia Lester Dillon was a very good choice for Georgia Women of Achievement, because part of what Georgia Women of Achievement seeks to do is not only tell us about these women whose names have survived, but about these women who were integral parts of their communities.
Julia Lester Dillon became one of the first authorities on Southern landscape architecture. Born in Warren County, Georgia, Julia moved with her parents to Augusta when she was a child. After graduating from public schools, she went on to Peabody College in Nashville to prepare for a teaching career.
Originally, she wasn't trained as a landscape architect. I don't know what women were back in those days. She did as I think they were supposed to. She became an educator. But she had things kind of tough there at the beginning.
At age 21, Julia wed William Dillon, and early in the marriage she contracted diphtheria, leaving her deaf. Then, before the couple's second anniversary, her husband suddenly passed away.
So she had a turning point in her life. It would be very difficult to teach without your hearing. But she knew she had a passion for landscaping and decided that's what she was going to do.
The time was ideal for a Southern landscape architect, and her love of gardens led her to pursue an education in landscape gardening in New York and Boston. Around the age of 40, Julia returned to Augusta to practice her new craft.
A lot of these early gardens in the South were not Southerners, who in some ways were still quite practical, growing herbs and food, but wealthy Northerners who wintered in the South. And Augusta was one of the main destinations. John D. Rockefeller, William Howard Taft, and people like that would come to Augusta, and many of these wealthy Northerners would meet each other here.
Northerners liked Augusta for its mild climate and great golfing, and many of them maintained homes here. Some of them brought their own gardeners, but they weren't trained in Southern landscapes, not even knowing what plants were indigenous to the area.
And a lot of her ideas definitely came from the European influence and were brought back to the United States. And she took that and tried to transform it to the Southern garden and found out very soon that you could not do that. The flora here was entirely different, but a lot of people were not trained in how to handle horticultural attributes of plant materials as a private or even public garden, because it was more agriculturally oriented.
In 1914, Julia began working with the Hardys, a wealthy couple from Chicago who built a winter home in Augusta named Twin Gables. It is now the home of the president of the Medical College of Georgia and still benefits from Julia's early garden plans.
She knew what plants would actually live in the South. She knew the Southern environment, and that kind of made her reputation, which grew in the area, and other people hired her, and she was able, as a widow, to support herself well doing that.
Today, actually, the state of Georgia owns that home, and it is the president's home for the medical college, and those gardens are still there. They still, have Julia Dillon's thumbprint on them.
Julia's career blossomed with commissioned work on courthouses, large parks, and school grounds throughout the South. She was the co-author of Augusta's slogan, Garden City of the South.
So I thank Julia for making my job easier. We still use Garden City of the South today.
She became so well known that she was hired away from Augusta to Sumter, South Carolina, where she ultimately became the superintendent of the parks department there, and there is a park named for her. So she's part of that changing environment for women that allowed them to be professionals.
By the time Memorial Park was completed, Julia was hired as Sumter's superintendent of parks and trees. During her tenure, which lasted until 1948, not one tree could be taken down without her approval.
She empowered women and encouraged them to design their gardens and to take stock in the greening of urban and rural America, not just their own private gardens.
In addition to her city job, Julia was also an author, writing a book at the age of 52. The Blossom Circle of the Year in Southern Gardens was the first book written on the subject of gardening in the South. She went on to write a pamphlet entitled Landscape Design 20 Lessons, and served as Home and Garden's Southern Garden editor from 1911 until 1916.
She must have been incredibly busy in 1922 to be able to write this somewhat voluminous book on plant materials, not only about the plants themselves, which is very poetic, but about how to care for them, when to plant them. I mean, everything seemed to be somewhat matter of fact to her, but what she was really trying to do was take her educational roots that she had and still teach people.
I think her presence is still here in Augusta, Georgia, but I think she's probably one of those real unsung heroes, one of those people that was very distinguished and did a lot for the community, but hasn't been recognized like she should.